Today, for our practice, we were instructed to imagine the sound of the wind and to listen to that sound and to withdraw from everything else, to withdraw from physical sensations and emotions and thoughts, and to become the perceiver of that sound. Okay, who struggled with physical sensations? Who is distracted by them? Who is distracted by emotions? Who is distracted by thoughts? Who is distracted by images, memories? This exercise, while it does have an ultimate benefit if you're able to utilize it to its full effectiveness, the process of attempting to work with it is also very instructive. So hopefully you're able to understand from what we'll teach in today's lecture precisely what that exercise can show you and its value. I understand that it can be frustrating to do practices like that, particularly if you don't fully understand why. But hopefully with today's talk you will. Today we're going to have the 15th of our series about the essentials of meditation. And in the previous lectures, we've outlined all of the essential practical terms and practices that you need to clearly understand in order to access the state of meditation. We define meditation as a state of consciousness. There are many terms for it in different languages. But at its base, the state of meditation is a state of perception and understanding that is unfiltered by desire, unaffected by anything subjective, but instead is a state of perception in which we clearly and without any possibility of mistake see reality. So for most of us, that is an unknown. Something that we've not experienced, something that we wish to experience, and we may have beliefs and theories about it. We may have dreams about it. We may have that longing to know it. But to experience the state of meditation is not a subjective thing. It is not a belief or a theory. It is an experience of consciousness, meaning that it is an experience of perception and understanding. That is universal. It is not cultural. And it is not dependent upon any belief system or theoretical system or philosophical system. And it is not dependent on anything outside of ourselves, but is produced exclusively and entirely by the activity of the consciousness, which is ours alone. Our consciousness is what gives us life, being. It is that which lets us be here and now, perceiving, and to some degree understanding what we perceive. That ability, when strengthened and grown, when trained, is what leads directly to meditation. It is simply an expansion of the ability we have right now to see and to understand. Now, to grasp that, to understand that with the intellect is easy. And to have beliefs about that is also easy. But to experience it is something else. To know it from your experience is something else. And even more is to be able to produce that experience at will when it is needed. That requires a lot of training. And it requires very specific laws of nature. Not laws imposed upon us by religion or a deity, but laws of nature. Laws of nature of how energy, matter, and consciousness interact. Those three fundamental things. So that's why the whole course has been about facts, consciousness, energy, action. Those are the forces that lead us to experience the state of meditation. Nothing else. So we set aside beliefs. We set aside philosophy. In some sense, you can say we set aside religion. Because generally for us nowadays, religion is just a bunch of beliefs and are usually quite distant from the facts. The experience of meditation is factual. It is an experience that can be produced by anyone, anywhere, anytime, as long as the laws are being worked with in the right way. In other words, as long as nature is being utilized in the right way. So the big question then that all spiritual people, all religious people, and all meditators have is, what is real? What is the fundamental truth? And in the heart of that question is, who am I in relation with that? This is the thing that everyone wants to know. Who am I really? Why am I alive? What is my purpose? What is my destiny? Where am I going? We don't know where we've come from, and we don't know where we're headed. And these huge questions that we have that burn in us at various times of our lives do have answers. But those answers must be found in facts, not in beliefs. You see, beliefs are inventions. They can be very beautiful and can be useful. But ultimately, they are unreliable and impermanent. Who can say that one belief is better than another belief? Obviously, the one who believes will believe that their belief is the best one. But they have no guarantee that it is true. Because a belief, while it is not proven, in fact, remains just a belief. When a belief becomes proven, becomes truth, it is no longer a belief. Then we have what's called faith. Faith is something else. Faith is from experience. When you study any scripture, particularly the Bible, these terms are very different in the Greek and in the Hebrew. But nowadays in English, we mix them up. We use belief and faith interchangeably, and that's completely wrong. Faith is something factual, based in experience, based in truth. That's why it used to be in Old English, we would say, I give faith, meaning I'm giving my testimony of what I have seen, what I've experienced, and what I can prove as true. So you see, a belief cannot be proven. Faith can be. Truth can be. Reality can be. So when it comes to the question of who am I, really? What is my purpose, really? We should be seeking to know the reality. And in order to reach that experience, one has to see belief for what it is and be willing to abandon it. Because oftentimes our beliefs are lies. And we can see that in our daily lives now. We meet a person, we develop an impression of that person, and thus we believe that they are a certain way. But then when we have experience with that person, our belief is overridden. Haven't we all had that experience? Don't we all misjudge people and misjudge situations and misjudge reality because of our beliefs about things? But this is especially true when it comes to religion, when it comes to our true identity, when it becomes a question of what is divine, what is real. So in the process of learning meditation, one has to also be willing to suspend belief. It can be okay to have them. They can guide us. They can give us principles and comfort in times of stress. But ultimately, we have to always see belief as something that is not yet proven. And then if the facts prove otherwise, we must rely on the facts. because the facts are reality. So on that basis, we need to examine this fundamental question. What is real? Who am I? Who is myself? And so for that, we study the tree of life. This image, this symbol, is universal in all traditions. It's organized in different ways. It has different names. But it fundamentally outlines for us the structure of nature. Not only the nature inside of us, but the nature outside of us. Each of us is a reflection of the universe. We are what we can call a microcosm, a mirror of the macrocosm. And that's why the scriptures say that we were made in the image, which in Hebrew is tsalem, the image of the divine, a reflection of the divine. Not divine yet, but with the potential to become that. And that's why the oracle at Delphi said, know yourself, and you will know the universe and its gods, because all of that is reflected in us. Thus, the purpose of meditation is to explore and come to know ourselves, so that in turn, we can know and understand the universe and its gods, all the divinities that exist throughout all the realms of nature. So the tree of life, from that point of view, represents densities, dimensions, levels of nature and existence, all of that which is outside of us, from the subatomic to the universal, to the infinite. It's all mapped here. But our interest is not so much in the exterior world. Our interest really is fundamentally in the interior world, that which we are, because that is what determines our experience of life. Our quality of being is what determines our experience. If we are suffering or happy, it's irrelevant which God is which. What matters is, what is the state of my consciousness? What is the state of my experience? What is producing my suffering or my happiness? And to understand those things, we study this image. We could also say that this image represents levels of impermanence, levels of interdependence, levels of truth. But let me explain at the outset, before we get into this in detail, even though this pattern is arranged vertically, it is not vertical in space. Meaning that here we can see on the image that this lowest sphere, or sephira, called Malkut, represents physicality. And above it are all the heavens, while below it are the hell realms. But that is not literally above and below, like some people think that heaven is in the clouds above us. That's absurd. The reality is everything is interpenetrating. Heaven and hell are here and now in varying densities in nature. They are not above and below in three-dimensional space. They are multidimensional. And we can demonstrate that by simply examining ourselves. We can feel and sense our physicality. And yet that physicality is able to be active and be in motion because it has energy. That energy is not necessarily physical. We can sense it physically, but we cannot necessarily measure it. For example, when you feel tired, can you measure that? Not really. You can feel it, you can sense it, you can tell somebody about it, but someone cannot measure your tiredness or your feeling of having energy and being energetic. And that energetic aspect is Yesod, the next Sephira. Similarly, we can sense and perceive our thoughts and emotions, but no one else can. No one can prove what they are thinking or feeling. Emotions and thoughts are here, hod, and netzach. Within us. You see, so these 4 Sephiroth are here and now, right now, within all of us. We are all experiencing them. They are mutually existing without confusion. And we can each verify the truth of that. But we cannot prove it to anyone else. Because we cannot prove our thoughts and emotions or our energy level to anyone else. Similarly, we have willpower. Our motive or our impulse to act, our intention. That energy that pushes us, that projects the force to act. But none of us can prove that we have that. We sense it, we feel it. We had the will to come to class today. And we did. And so the evidence of will is there in the traces of our physical movement. But that's the only evidence of it. There is no other evidence of it. So you can see that as we ascend from physicality, we are dealing with things that we can sense and experience, but we cannot prove them. Not with the physical senses. Yet we all accept that they are real. We all know that we have energy, emotion, and thought, and willpower. But the further we get from physicality, the more subtle they become as well. The more difficult it is for our intellect to explain them or to recognize them as what they are, even though we all experience them. The thing to understand is that these aspects of our experience are not everything that exists. Moreover, to understand them, you have to understand them in relationship with the rest. And you have to understand them in the context within which they work. Now, obviously, this map shows much more than just physicality and our energy and our emotions and our thoughts and our will. There are many more subtle levels and many more dense levels. In the context of our continuity of experience, none of us have any clue what divine soul or divine consciousness is, which is related with the Sefer Geburah. None of us have any idea or experience with chesed, which is spirit or atman, even though all of us have theories about that. We all have theories about divinity. Some of us have the theory that there is no such thing. So we call ourselves atheists. Some of us have the theory that God is a bearded man that sits on a throne up in the clouds. Some of us think divinity is a bunch of people walking around in white robes, smiling all the time. Or it's a bunch of angels in heaven singing songs for eternity. We have a lot of thoughts about divinity, a lot of theories and beliefs, but who among us has experience, has perceived and understood divinity directly, personally, moreover, can produce that experience at will, anytime it's necessary? I know that we all have beliefs about that. We believe, well, if I pray and I tell divinity all my thoughts and all my desires and all my fears, then I'm perceiving divinity. But that's not perception through your eyes, through your sense of touch. That is not an experience like you're having physically now. But you can have those experiences. Every scripture explains them. Every scripture talks about experiences with the divine, directly talking with the divine, directly talking with angels or prophets, Buddhas, masters, whatever you want to call them. Directly speaking with God, in other words. The reality is that it is possible to have those experiences. That's why we have religions. That's their purpose. So the purpose of Christianity, of Hinduism, of Buddhism, of Judaism, Zoroastrianism, and all the different traditions that humanity has received over the millennia is precisely to show us who exist in these physical bodies in so much confusion, how to come to know the reality that is symbolized in all the religions as divinity or as God, which on the tree of life is shown by these upper aspects of the tree. You see significantly that the very top is a trinity, and every religion has that. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya. Every religion has that for a reason. And beyond that trinity is the space that it emerges out of, which is called the emptiness, the absolute, shunyata. Many names for that primordial potential. So you see, the tree of life shows many profound things. Heavens above, hells below, and us caught in the middle, not knowing anything, but suffering. Being born, growing up, getting an education, being heavily influenced by many things, struggling to survive, suffering with so many questions and pains, trying to do our best, and then we die. Is there a point to that? Is there a reason for that? All of us hope there is, and there is, and we can come to know it. And to do so, we have to start working here and now with who we are, with what we are, with the facts. So in this course, we've explained that the work to learn meditation begins right now by becoming aware of our three brains. We call these brains because they are machines. They are transformers of data. They receive and transmit information, each in its own way, purely mechanically. They are not our self. They are just machines that we use in order to exchange information. So right now, you are hearing me explain conceptual terms and conceptual, you could say philosophy or a theory. So you're using your physical body, and through the senses of the body, which are related with this motor, instinctual, sexual center, you're receiving that information, which is being transformed through your intellectual and emotional centers. And that information is then passed to the consciousness, which is the one perceiving through those three brains. And your consciousness then interprets it in collaboration with these centers. You see, motor, instinctive, sexual receives the data through the senses. Your intellect compares that data with your language skill so you can extract meaning. It also compares that data with your emotional feeling about it, how it corresponds to your emotions. Is what I'm saying upsetting you? Are you indifferent to it? Is it exciting you? You can have different emotional reactions that occur throughout the course of the discussion and different intellectual reactions that occur throughout the discussion. But all of that's happening on its own. You don't have to do anything. Nature has given us those tools. We're just unaware of them. But that's not all we are. This is something we can measure here and now. But obviously it's not all of what we are. And yet these three brains relate to the tree of life. The physical body relates to Malkut, the lowest Sephira. It also relates to Yesod, energy, because all of this is made possible by the energy that's flowing through the three brains. And there are different kinds of energy. Each of these has its own. Moreover, emotions, the emotional brain is related with Hod, and the intellectual is related with Netzach, thought. So right here, right now, in our physical bodies, we are experiencing the tree of life. And where's the center of all of that in us? The core of it, the spinal column. This is what makes your body capable of doing anything. The spinal column. It is the central hub around which all of your activity circulates. Everything about you moves in and out of your nervous system, the three nervous systems, which are related with the three brains. And of course, at the top of that is what we call the physical brain. In the middle of that is the emotional brain, the heart. And at the bottom, the sexual energy, the sexual brain. These are the forces that determine the course of our life. But they are not all of what we are. What is it that tells all of this what to do? Where is the self in this? Many people are mistaking the physical body for the self. And all of us are victims of that. As we start getting older, we start feeling like, oh, I'm aging, I'm getting embarrassed, I'm not as pretty and handsome and young as I used to be, and we start to feel shame. We start to feel intimidated by beautiful people and young people because we're mistaking the appearance of the physical body as a reflection of our identity. And we think that when the body dies, we die. That when we lose the body, that's it. That's the end. It shows that we think the body is the self. And this is 100% ignorant of reality. The body is not the self. The body is just a vessel. It's temporary. We have it for a while, we discard it, and we get another one. And I know that your beliefs may not agree with that, but every religion documents that, often symbolically. Even in the Bible, even though the Christians reject reincarnation, it is in the Bible. And the doctrine or notion of reincarnation or return is completely congruent with science. Einstein himself is the one who said, energy cannot be destroyed, only changed. And your consciousness is an energy. And you've experienced that every day of your life. You can feel when someone's looking at you from behind you. You don't see them with your physical senses, but you feel the energy of their perception on you, and you turn to look. Who's looking at me? That is energy that you sense. And that energy of perception and understanding does not die. It changes, yes. It goes through many changes, according to our actions. Death is a change, a big change. But it is not the end. If you want to know what happens when you die, look at what happens when you go to sleep. Because you enter the same world at death. Energy doesn't die, it just changes. It passes in and out. If we observe nature, we see how the cycles of nature work. There are seasons and cycles. Every year, everything dies, and every year, everything comes back. Every day, the sun goes down. Every day, the sun rises. When we die, the energy leaves the body. The body is left behind. But that energy goes on because it is not the body. And because it has a impulse, a force of energy that must be resolved in nature, it needs to return again into a body because it is unresolved. It submerges and reemerges, submerges and reemerges. But just the same way as we don't remember our dreams at night, and we don't remember what happened to us last week or 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, the process of death and rebirth is so powerful that we forget what happens through that process. Nevertheless, death is not the end of us. It just changes the physical body and the energetic body. If we are not the body, we are also not emotion and thought. These also are impermanent and unreliable. Is that really the basis of self? Our thoughts or our emotions? We couldn't really say that. But if we go deeper, we can say what guides all of this, what's deeper than all of this, is consciousness itself. We experience sensations in the body through consciousness. We experience emotion through consciousness. We experience thought through consciousness. When we dream, we leave this body. We experience the world of dreams with consciousness. So in that, we're starting to get closer to the root of self. What is self? It's not found in these superficial levels. So that's why when we look at the tree of life, as we recognize that physicality is not ourselves, its energy is not ourselves, emotion is not self, thought is not self, here with human soul or willpower, we're starting to get something related with self. But we don't really know that. And we have a hard time really recognizing it for what it is because we're not trained to work with it very effectively. We're uncertain about it, most people. In this tradition, we call that particle essence. In Buddhism, they call it Tathagata Garbha or Buddhadhatu. And those terms in English are usually translated as Buddha nature. And what they imply is that every living thing is a seed or an embryo that can become something more. We could say that the consciousness, when it's born into a physical body, is a spark of this sephira, tiferet, that emerges in physicality with the three brains, born as a baby, and cries because of confusion. And little by little, that child grows, and that essence or consciousness is so beautiful. If you look into the face of a child, you are seeing the beauty of the unconditioned, unfiltered consciousness. It just radiates so much innocence and beauty. It is incomprehensible to our mind. And that's why when we look at babies, we are overwhelmed with their innocence and their purity. And we all have that within us. But unfortunately, because of the process of dying and being reborn and dying and being reborn, and all the accumulated actions that we've made throughout the process of that experience, once we're born into a new body, within a few years, we start to receive the consequences of all our previous actions. And we see how a baby begins to change dramatically. That sweet, beautiful child becomes a terror, a little devil, with a completely different way of behavior that changes quite fast. It used to be that change occurred around ages 6 and 7, but nowadays it's much earlier. The changes start happening at 2 and 3 years old. So what's happening there is that the child is not only receiving the consequences of their previous actions, they're also starting to create what is called personality. Personality is our inheritance, psychologically, of the circumstances we're born into. So now we're discussing 3 really important aspects of our psychological experience: personality, ego, and essence or consciousness. The distinctions between these are so important. And if you cannot understand them, if you don't understand them, you'll never learn what meditation is. In fact, your life will always be a confused mess. But when you can really understand the distinctions between these, you can make tremendous changes in your life and reduce your suffering a lot. When the baby starts to develop, it's received from its circumstances, its genetic influences, heredity, culture, language, religion, its country, etc. This is everything that we learn as a child. You know, when the baby emerges into the world, it's so innocent and so fragile and is incapable of interacting with others. It doesn't have language. It can't control its body. It doesn't have the reasoning that adults have. It has emotions in a very incipient state. And it's unable to express itself. So, those in the environment of the child educate the child. And naturally, that child only receives the education relevant to where it grows up. So babies born here in this country learn to behave like everyone else in this country. They receive the influences of their parents and their friends and their neighbors and their teachers and their siblings and what they see on television and the internet. And all of those influences form the persona, a mask. It gives them their way of speaking, their way of interpreting what is said. It gives them their context through which to understand what they are perceiving. So it is a mask that filters. It acts as an intermediary between what is inside and what is outside. Does it make sense? It sounds simple. It isn't, because none of us see it. We think the personality is our identity as well. In the same way that we confuse the physical body as being our identity, we think our personality is our identity. We think me with my name, with my parents, with my language, my religion, my culture, my politics, my musical taste, my fashion sense, all of that is me. And that is a bold lie. That is a very temporary experience. Your personality is only retained through the course of that one lifetime. And it is very insubstantial and very unreliable. As an example, if that identity is yourself, then why does it change so easily? It's really unreliable. When you move from one job to another job, have you observed that when you move to the new job, you start changing how you talk, how you dress, how you eat? Even your politics can change because you're under new influences and you want to fit in, you want to be accepted, you want to be loved, you want to be liked, and so you start to behave like everyone else around you. If you move to a new city, you may change your religion or your politics, your way of dressing, all because of that urge to be loved, to be accepted. So how is that your real self when you are blatantly changing it to please others, to acquire security? Look at people now, young people especially. Adults can see this in kids easy. When your kids start making friends and they start talking differently, using the slang, listening to the same music as their friends or dressing in the same way as their friends, as a parent you see that they're doing it to fit in. But the child thinks it's real. The child thinks, this is really who I am. I have to wear that thing and listen to that music because that is my identity. And it's wrong. It's not. But the adults, we don't see that we're doing the same thing. We just don't see it. We all do that. That is the nature of personality. It is impermanent, unreliable. You may, through the process of meditating, through the process of working with your dreams and having visions, start to recall experiences of when you were alive in the past, in different eras. In that experience, you will understand this so vividly because you will perceive in those experiences, those memories, how different your personality was at those times. If you brought your personality from 14th century Europe to here and now, it would not fit in. It would not be able to talk to anyone. It would not be able to understand anything because that personality belongs to the time in which it was made. So when we die physically, we cast off that personality. We lose the physical body, we lose its energy, and the personality. And that is what people often see hanging around graves. Haunting houses. What we call ghosts are discarded personalities. That decay in correspondence with the decay of the body. They are energetic forms that have no real existence. We need them while we're in a body. They're what allow us to relate to others and relate to the context within which we live. But they are not identity. They are not self. The second aspect we would need to talk about is ego or desire. Of course, the Latin word ego means I. This is, of course, much deeper than personality. And we experience it as our sense of self on a deeper level than personality, even without much awareness, but with much more power over our behavior. And it's hard sometimes to differentiate between personality and ego or desire, because the ego, the desires that we have, are subconscious, meaning they are below our awareness. They are deep within the mind that we have, within the psyche. And they influence us in ways that we don't perceive directly. The qualities of the ego are all the defects, the sins that we know, pride and envy and jealousy, lust especially. Those qualities define ego. They are desires for what I want, and I don't care what it costs to get it. That's ego. This quality has become incredibly powerful in humanity, and it is accrued through cause and effect. When our consciousness, working through our body and through our three brains, is interacting with the external world, the personality is there as a filter. And we're dealing with other people. Someone says something painful that hurts our feelings. Our pride is hurt. So here, look at this example. There we are physically using our three brains. We hear the word that someone says that's interpreted through the senses. The personality knows that language and takes that term in context and understands, hey, that term is an insult. And that translation passes through the consciousness as an insult, and we feel pain. That strikes our pride. They said, what about me? And we feel hurt. And what becomes the immediate experience of that pain? Anger. So you see how all these pieces fit together? Three brains, the body, the energy, emotion, thought, personality, ultimately ego. And all of that is there and happens in that way because of the way we're transforming the information that's passing into us. We're transforming it in a subjective way, rooted in ignorance about our true nature. We think the body is our identity, the personality is our identity, and our experience amongst our friends and neighbors is our identity. And when someone says something that contradicts that, we feel pain. Because that points to us a reality that we don't want to recognize. If someone criticizes our religion, we get very angry. Why? Because they're pointing to us it's something that we don't want to see, which is that religion, that belief, maybe not real. What if they're right? If we were really convicted and had faith, we wouldn't feel anger. For example, if someone comes to you and says, you know what, you're wrong, the earth is flat, we wouldn't feel pain because it's stupid. It's obvious the world is not flat. We would feel maybe compassion for that person, not anger. But if they say something, your religion is a bunch of lies and you're all going to hell, we'd feel upset. You see the difference? This is really important because all of the aspects that we have that are related to ego are built upon that basis of not knowing who we really are and not knowing what the reality actually is. And through the course of our day-to-day experience, by interacting with our experience in the wrong way, in a mistaken way, we're transforming energy in a mistaken way and creating consequences for ourselves. And one of those consequences is repressed, buried transformation of impressions. Pain, trauma, suffering, pride, and shame, and anger, and laziness, and resentment. all of that boiling pain and suffering that we carry around in our subconsciousness. And that are constantly there manipulating us at every turn. We're in actually a very bad situation. Terrifically bad. Because right now, we all are living in this illusion that somehow everything will just work itself out. And there are no facts in history that support that view. Nowhere. And not in religion either. In the Gospels, Jesus says, no liar, no fornicator, no adulterer, no thief, no murderer will gain access to the kingdom. He says elsewhere that if you even look upon another person with lust, you have committed adultery. Meaning that if you've looked on someone with lust, and you've committed adultery with them in your heart, that means you can't go to heaven. That directly contradicts what the Christians say. Christians say, if you just believe in Jesus, he'll forgive you and you go to heaven. The Bible doesn't say that. The Bible states clearly that you can only go to heaven if you are pure. That's what the tree of life shows us. These upper regions are entirely pure. These are why they're called heavens. That's why we call them divinity or the divine. If divinity was mixed with anger, with lust, with pride, with ego, it would not be divine. It's obvious, right? If God had lust, that would not be God. If God had pride or fear, that would not be God. For there to be something that we can call God, it must be pure of desire, empty of pain, and instead be just all of those positive qualities, joy and altruism and wisdom and intelligence. That is what we call divine. And that is why all the religions state, if we want to enter into heaven or nirvana or paradise, whatever we call that, we must be pure. We must be innocent like the little children, like the baby is in its pure state, completely absent of pride, and only expressing great love and generosity, altruism, and incredible beauty. None of us have that in our day-to-day experience because we've created so much ego and we're clutching to it as though it's our identity. We clutch on to our suffering. We hold fast to our pain and we don't want to let it go. We know that our anger is killing us and that our addictions are killing us, but we won't let them go. This is our tragedy. The being, the divine, cannot mix with ego, with lust, with desire. They cannot mix. This is what puts us in our place in life. If we want to access happiness, true happiness, which we can call nirvana, that word means cessation of suffering. If we want to access heaven, just as every religion says, we have to purify ourselves of all of this. We must become pure and innocent, 100%, completely clean of desire, pure, absolutely radiant, so that the qualities that we express through every action, physically, energetically, emotionally, and mentally, and in every act of will, is 100% pure, clean, no ego, no desire, no lust, no anger, no pride, no envy, no jealousy, no fear. And that is our true nature. That is the potential that we all have. We once had it. In the Bible, it's represented by Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, at that first moment of creation, were absolutely pure, innocent, and capable of speaking directly with God. But temptation, lust, overcame them. And they, through their own action, cast themselves out of happiness. That's the meaning of the story in the Bible. So to return to that happiness, we have to undo the mistake that we're repeating every day, falling victim to desire, listening to the temptation and acting on it, and creating more consequences for ourselves, more suffering. This is the meaning. These qualities are within us, stimulated by our external circumstances, by perceptions, but they are qualities that lurk inside the mind. To overcome them, we need to profoundly understand this third aspect, which is essence, consciousness. And as I explained in the beginning, this is the ability to perceive at its root, at its core. Consciousness in itself is being. But in us, it's just a seed. It's an embryo. It's the potential to become. But it has to be nourished and grown like any seed in nature. It has to be strengthened, protected. So our practices that we do with regard to meditation are about activating consciousness in the present moment and strengthening it. Learning to extract it from all the things that condition it and giving it a chance to grow and flourish free of negative influence. So that's why when we meditate, we relax the body. We relax the energy. We let go of emotion. We retreat from thought. We become the perceiver, the consciousness itself. Free of all those conditioning influences, in the moment, perceiving and fully relaxed. Now, in that state, you can see that the body has become passive. The body should be perfectly still and at rest, which means that its energy should also be perfectly still and at rest. And our emotion and thought should be perfectly still and at rest. And the only thing active there is consciousness, attentiveness, fixed and made consistent. And now what happens? There's a statement in science that says, nature abhors a void. And in spirituality, we have another way of saying the same thing. God searches the nothingness in order to fill it. So in meditation, if you empty your experience of that self, all those lies of self, God will fill it. You will experience divinity. But you cannot experience divinity as long as you are clothing yourself in your pain, in your pride, in your anger, in your lust, in your fear. As long as you're wrapping yourself up in your personality, in your body, in your ego, in your desires, in all of your traumas, and all of your attachments, you can never experience divinity. It's that simple. Those who study yoga and religion, mysticism, spirituality, and all these so-called New Age theories want to take their body and their anger and pride and lust to heaven with them. And they are like a scientist who wants to study the universe with a microscope. Or they want to study an atom with a telescope. They're working in the total backwards way. It would make no sense to try to cook a meal with the tools you use to work on your car. And it's the same thing with meditation. To succeed in meditation, you need to work with the right tools. The body is a conditioning factor that needs to be used in the right way and put in the right place. The same with energy and emotion and thought. They have their place, they have their role. But to access meditation, they must all become passive. The personality must become passive. So all of these lower parts must become passive, still, inactive. Ego, physicality, energy, emotion, thought. Passive. When all those become still and passive, and only the consciousness is active, do you see what is capable of reaching? The rest of the tree of life. That which is divine. As long as the consciousness is hypnotized in thought, emotion, energy, physicality, and desire, it can never experience the divine. So that's it. That's all meditation is about. Recognizing each part of ourselves for what it is, using them in the right way. Now, based on that understanding, we can start to understand what is self. Self is not ego. It is not the body. It is not the body's energy. It is not emotion or thought. Self is not even tiferet, consciousness, because something is there behind consciousness. Where did consciousness come from? What gave it the ability to be? You see, consciousness is also a transformer of energy. It perceives and understands. In other words, there's energy moving back and forth. It is a conduit, a transmitter, a receiver and a transmitter from above and below. It is only in the middle of the tree of life, and there's much more above it. So, Geburah, the next Sephiroth up, we can relate most closely with intuition. A type of knowing, a type of mind that is not logical, but knows. A type of insight, a type of understanding that knows, but without reasoning. It is a type of mirror that reflects reality. In Sanskrit, it's called buddhi. In every tradition, we find it represented in different ways. In the Bible, it is the Shulamite of the Song of Songs. That mirror reflects the next Sephirah, which is Hesed, which means mercy. These two are mercy and justice. These are the two plates of the scale of justice, the scale of karma, in other words, mercy and severity. Chesed is even more subtle to us than Geburah. In Hinduism, they call this Atman. And so many Hindus will say, that's the self. Because many traditions in Hinduism say that is the self. It isn't. It's an aspect of self. In spirituality in the West, that part is called spirit. That's where we get the word spirituality. Spirit. I mentioned that the Hindus think that Atman is the real self. But the Buddha taught the doctrine of anatman. So what he was pointing out was, just like the rest of the tree of life, each part has its place, each part is relative, but none exist independently on their own. And thus, if we want to find the ultimate root of self, we have to keep going deeper. We don't find self in these lower four related with our psyche and body. We don't find it in will. We don't find it in Geburah, the divine soul. We don't find it in Atman, the spirit. We start to find it in the upper Trinity, which in Christianity, again, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. More subtle. Forces that are very subtle in us, but that are what give us the basis of being alive. But even those parts, in the ultimate sense, depend on something more, something else for them to be. And that is precisely the absolute itself, all the way up at the very heights on this graphic. That is the primordial potentiality of all things. It is the space within which everything that is becomes. Even the highest of the high divinities, the Father itself, Keter, Brahma, Dharmakaya, whichever name you want to use from whichever tradition you feel close to, only exists because of the absolute that gives it the potential to exist, the light that emerges out of the emptiness. Now, if all this sounds really abstract to you, that's okay. Gradually, if you could persist in practice, you will start to understand the importance of it. Learning to meditate, learning to relax, learning to use consciousness, all of these are very, very important. But at any step in the process, it is easy to fall into illusion. It is only by comprehending the totality of things and the ultimate source of things that you can be led to reach it. Most of those who study spirituality and religion fall into attachment. They succumb to desire, and they get distracted at some stage or another, seduced. So for us who are here in the physical world, who are asleep and have no experience, we're seduced daily by the fear that's being pounded into us by the media, and by the fear that's being pounded into us by religions, and by the incredible materialism being pounded into us by advertisers. And we get seduced by that on a daily basis. So even if we get serious about spirituality, we shut off the TV and the internet, we shut off all those outside influences, and we start to practice seriously, and you start to awaken and have experiences, there are still temptations. Someone can have an experience where they start to have experiences in these other dimensions outside of the physical body. And they may start to feel like, wow, I'm just like one of those saints in the Bible, or I'm just like one of those yogis in old India, or I'm just like one of those, great practitioners in Buddhism. And they fall into the illusion of pride. And they start calling themselves Master so-and-so when they aren't. They start to acquire followers and get a Rolls Royce and do all the things that people do when they think they have something that they don't have. The way to avoid falling into those traps is to have your eyes squarely on the goal, which is the emptiness itself, the absolute. And how does one reach that goal? By abandoning all notion of self. By recognizing that the very notion of self is a lie. And how do we know that is true? Because of what all the greatest teachers have taught us. Why do you think it says, what is the greatest commandment? To love another as yourself. In other words, to put the other person before yourself. To consider the value and welfare of others before your own. In the true expression of that type of compassion, one no longer considers oneself at all, but only serves. In that expression, we are seeing reflected the very nature of the absolute and that light that comes out as the Ein Sof. The nature of that light is utter simplicity. You see the tree of life, how complex it becomes the further down you go? The further down you go, the more dense and complex and heavy things become. And correspondingly, the higher you go, the simpler and more pure things become. So at the very height, that light is one thing. It is pure love. the purest compassion. If you were to consider, just imagine for a moment, all of the divinities that exist in all of the universes that exist, by whatever names, if you call them angels or Buddhas or gods or masters, it doesn't matter what the names are. But imagine those beings, and their chief characteristic is love for others. And the collection of all that love is that light. So to become part of that, you must become empty of self, recognizing that all of these things that you call self are fundamentally illusion. And that what is real and what is true is love, compassion. The capability that we have as beings to express the light of wise and intelligent love is the greatest capacity that we have. There's nothing better than that. Nothing more powerful, nothing more needed, nothing more useful. If this planet, the people on this planet, were only to eliminate 3% of their ego, this planet would be a paradise. That's how low we are on the scale of things. Now, the truth is, when we study these three aspects of ourselves, ego, personality, and consciousness, when you're really honest with yourself, you see through your day-to-day work on yourself that your consciousness is very weak, untrained. You try to meditate, it's really hard. You try to do things right and be pure, it's really hard because the ego is so powerful and so subtle. Objectively speaking and realistically speaking, the truth is, even if we don't like to say it or hear it, this humanity right now has 97% of the consciousness trapped in ego and desire. Trapped. Completely enslaved by desire. That's why this planet is the way that it is. It is destroying itself because of us. Because of our psychological condition. It isn't hopeless. It's on the verge of hopeless, but it's not hopeless. So by meditating daily, using the consciousness daily, strengthening and nourishing that skill, that presence, we can overcome that ego and conquer it. Moreover, we can confirm all of these things for ourselves. You don't have to believe me. You can know it for yourself. You simply have to apply the tools. So on that note, we will describe the exercises for this lecture. Every day we want to deepen and expand our self-observation. This skill, self-observation, is to bring the consciousness into the moment on a continual basis and to observe things objectively, to note and see things and make the effort to not be filtered through the personality, through sensation, through desire, through ego, but instead to start to see things objectively. But what is the most important thing that you can see objectively? Yourself. This is about self-observation, not my wife observation, or my boss observation, or my neighbor observation. It is self-observation. And as we described in the lecture today, what is self? Who is that? So really what we're trying to watch is, how am I continually mistaking self? Here I am doing this and that, and I'm here thinking and assuming that this is self. So we need to recognize that and expand back from it. Retreat from thinking that the body is self from thought, emotion, energy, sensation, words, theories, beliefs. But instead to look at ourselves objectively, expanding consciousness from moment to moment, and seeing things as they are, seeing the facts. This is a skill that takes years to really learn, and it takes a lot of energy. The next is to practice the meditative retrospection every day. It's what we've taught in the middle section of the course. And this is a daily review of all the facts that we observed during the day. This practice is supremely important as well. It is in this exercise that we gather together the facts that we observed throughout the day. And we notice the gaps. We're looking for the places that we did not pay attention. We're looking for where we lost our attention, where we got hypnotized, where we got tempted, where we were fooled, where we made mistakes. And this, in combination, is so that we can go to the third aspect of practice, which is to pick one of those facts and meditate on that. That becomes the subject of our meditation. All of this is based entirely on facts. No beliefs, no speculation, no theories. Facts only. We become private investigators, detectives, investigating the criminals that are in our minds. Those criminals that we call pride and lust and envy. Those criminals who have been stealing from us for lifetimes and making our lives a living hell. It's time that we take it back. Put the criminals in prison. Let them be executed so we can be free. And this is how you do it. If you persist in this combination of practices, your life will change. Not because I said so, but because you're becoming more and more aware of the reality. And you're becoming more and more aware of the illusions that your own mind is weaving around you all the time. The lies you tell yourself. The deceptions that you have clutched onto as your security blanket. You will start to see them for what they are. That your personality doesn't mean anything. That your physical body is going to die. And you need to be prepared for that. That the ego is taking you to hell. And you need to eliminate it if you want to access something better than that. These are very dramatic, very real things that can be dealt with, but it takes work. They don't come easily. Like everything in nature, everything in the universe, everything is based on cause and effect. Nothing is free. Yes, divinity loves us. Yes, happiness is our ultimate purpose. But we cannot have it as long as we are producing the causes of pain. And we are the ones who create pain, no one else. God doesn't give us pain. The divinity doesn't want us to suffer. But divinity respects the laws of nature. We suffer because we broke the law. When we come in harmony with the law, we don't suffer anymore. It's that simple. So, fourth, I really recommend to work with a spiritual diary. Again, writing facts. The importance of this is that we are in such a weakened and shallow state of being that we don't retain cognizance of what we've been doing. You know, very few of us can remember what we were doing yesterday from minute to minute. And if you go back a few days further, you can remember less and less and less. Even though we all think we're spiritual and we're working on awakening consciousness, we really don't have much cognizance. So when you record a diary, you're making factual notes for yourself that give you an ability to look back and analyze data. So if you lie in your diary, you're lying to yourself. And if you don't use a diary, you're wasting time. You're wasting an opportunity that could be extremely informative to you.